Spell 174, known as the spell for giving a mouth to the Osiris, originates in the Coffin Texts, a corpus of Middle Kingdom mortuary incantations intended not only to protect the dead, but to reconstitute them as sentient participants in the cosmic order. The text reads, "I have brought to you your mouth, I have brought to you your lips, I have opened for you your mouth. May you speak with your mouth in the presence of the great Ennead in Heliopolis. May you see with your eyes, may you hear with your ears, may you stand on your feet, and may your arms be before you. May your soul not be repelled from your body in the divine realm, so that it may be with the gods and be invoked at the invocation offerings of Osiris." At first glance, the spell appears anatomical or magical in function, a rite to reanimate the faculties of the deceased. Yet its title signals a more profound operation, not merely to restore speech, but to bestow a mouth, that is, to inaugurate the conditions for intentional, intelligible, and ethically resonant speech in the presence of the divine. Within the Egyptian conception of death, this capacity is not incidental, it is essential. To speak is not only to communicate, it is to invoke, declare, affirm, and participate in the ritual economy of offerings, judgment, and memory. Without a mouth, the deceased cannot speak the spells, affirm their truth, or assert their identity. Without speech, there is no agency. Spell 174 is thus a metaspell, a spell that does not merely say but makes saying itself possible. It does not articulate content but orchestrates the conditions for meaningful articulation. Its structure is therefore neither linear nor ornamental. It operates through a sequence of functional triads, tripartite systems of relation among bodily, cognitive, and cosmic elements. These triads are not metaphorical groupings, but semantic mechanisms, each governed by a distinct logical pattern that enables a particular dimension of sentient agency. Speech here is not a faculty given wholesale. It is constructed iteratively through the reactivation of faculties, the reordering of the body, and the embedding of the self within a field of divine intelligibility. Our analytic method treats these triads as formal logical structures, each instantiating a specific mode of relation: causality, convergence, reinforcement, integration, and more. These patterns are drawn from a typology of interrelational dynamics in which each triad is identified by its operational logic and ontological function. This framework allows us to read the spell not as a static incantation, but as a ritual technology, a procedural system for generating a being capable of truth. Each triad enacts a recursive alignment between the faculties of the deceased and the structure of Ma'at, the Egyptian principle of truth, order, and justice. Through this alignment, the dead do not merely return to life. They are initiated into consciousness, into awareness with consequence, and into speech that is recognized within the divine court. What follows, then, is not simply a commentary or translation. It is a reconstruction of a system of becoming, an epistemic ascent enacted through language. Each triad is a logical rung in the construction of the logos, each pattern a syntax of emergence, and together they form the architecture by which the dead become speakers, not because they are alive, but because they are intelligible. I have brought to you your mouth. I have brought to you your lips. I have opened for you your mouth. May you speak. This triad marks the spell's point of origin, not merely in sequence, but in structure. Here the work of restoration begins with the faculties of speech. Yet what is being restored is not just anatomy, but capacity. The capacity to generate meaning, to utter truth, to participate in the fabric of the cosmos. The mouth is more than a physical opening. It is the threshold where interiority becomes audible, where intention crosses into articulation. The lips, in turn, are the agents of modulation. They shape sound into sense, form into language. And speech, in this context, is not a neutral act of communication, but a sacred function. To speak in the Egyptian ritual worldview is to enact presence, to activate spells, to align oneself with the forces that govern order and rightness. The restoration described here is not mechanical but metaphysical. The spell's repeated declarations, I have brought to you your mouth. I have brought to you your lips. I have opened your mouth, are not redundant. They build a sequence of enablement. Each act prepares the conditions for the next, culminating not in speech as sound, but in speech as consequence. To speak in the presence of the great Ennead is not simply to be audible, it is to be recognized. It is to issue utterance within a moral and cosmological register, to have one's voice count as true within the divine economy. This is the triad that grants not animation, but agency. It does not return the dead to biological life. It situates them within a system where speech is the vehicle of will and the signature of being. The mouth, the lips, the act of speech. These together form the first movement toward freedom. Not freedom as license, but freedom as alignment. The ability to say what is and have it resonate with what ought to be. The triad functions not as a spell of resurrection, but as a rite of initiation into the realm of the knowable and the meaningful. When this triad is activated, whether in funerary ritual or symbolic practice, it does not merely permit language, it conditions it. It teaches that to speak with power, one must first be restored in form, in structure, in orientation. It reminds us that speech worthy of the gods must emerge not from noise or desire alone, but from the coherent confluence of intent, form, and order. This is where the spell begins, because this is where the self begins, not with life, but with voice. May you see with your eyes, may you hear with your ears. If the first triad inaugurates the possibility of meaningful speech, this second triad ensures that such speech arises from perception rightly ordered. The mouth has been opened, the lips restored, and the voice made potent. But before it can speak truth, it must know truth. Thus the restoration continues, turning now from expression to perception, from the power to say to the capacity to see and to hear. In the Egyptian worldview, the eyes and ears are not passive instruments, but active faculties of discernment. To see is not simply to take in light, but to recognize patterns, to apprehend Ma'at in the visible world. The eyes are attuned to form, order, and divine presence. They are organs of conscious recognition. The ears, by contrast, receive what is not seen. Instruction, invocation, the hidden voice of will and command. Together they constitute the perceptual foundation by which one is able to bear witness, not only to the world, but to the truth that structures it. Yet this pair of faculties is incomplete without the field in which they operate. Unspoken but unmistakably invoked is the third element of this triad, the divine tribunal, the great Ennead in Heliopolis. It is not enough to see and hear. One must be present to something, present before something, and that something is the divine order itself. Sight and hearing in isolation do not complete the subject. They find their completion in presence before the gods, where perception becomes meaningful because it is accountable. The logic here is convergent. Seeing and hearing are distinct, but they converge upon the same axis, the preparation of the self for meaningful participation in judgment. To see without hearing is to risk misjudgment. To hear without seeing is to lack confirmation. Only the one who sees and hears together stands in the fullness of perception, poised not just to speak, but to speak with knowledge. This triad forms the epistemological ground of justified speech. It aligns the faculties of the body with the structure of the cosmos, such that utterance becomes a response to reality, not a projection of ignorance. In practice, this triad follows naturally from the first. Once the mouth has been opened, once the voice has been enabled, it must be governed by right perception. The one who would speak must first become one who listens and sees, not only outwardly, but inwardly, attuned to form, order, presence. In ritual, this is the moment of attunement. In meditation, the moment of readiness. It teaches that agency does not begin with will, but with witness. When the eyes are opened and the ears restored, the self is no longer isolated. It is returned to a world where truth can be known and in being known can be spoken. May you stand on your feet, and may your arms be before you. With the voice restored and the senses aligned, the spell turns to the body, not as a shell to be reanimated, but as a structure to be reoriented. The legs and arms are not incidental, they are instruments of ritual form. To stand is not merely to rise, it is to align vertically with the moral axis of the cosmos, to lift the self into a posture of presence and intention. The legs signify this vertical alignment, a stance that mirrors the stability and uprightness of Ma'at itself. The arms, placed before the body, are not positioned randomly. They indicate openness, offering, readiness to give and to receive. Together, these gestures do not simply animate the body. They compose it into a ritual figure, a being recognized by form as one who is prepared to act. The third element implied by this triad is posture itself, the embodied configuration through which a subject becomes ritually intelligible. To have arms and legs is not enough. They must be arranged in a way that declares readiness, presence, and intention. Posture, in the Egyptian ritual context, is a mode of speech. It speaks even before words are spoken. It testifies to the internal condition of the self, whether it is coherent, attentive, prepared to participate in truth. Here, the triadic relation is one of mutual reinforcement. The legs support the uprightness of the form, the arms enact the gesture of participation, and posture emerges as their synthesis. None of these can function alone. Standing without offering is incomplete, and offering without the foundation of upright presence is incoherent. The spell binds them together as a unit of embodied agency, restoring not motion but form suffused with meaning. This moment in the spell marks a shift. The deceased is no longer being reassembled in parts but is now taking form as a ritual subject, not merely alive but positioned. Voice has been granted, perception restored, and now the body declares, "I am here, I am ready, I belong." The ritual posture is the visible confirmation of interior alignment. It is a bodily claim to place and function in sacred space. For the practitioner, this triad is a reminder that the body is not neutral in sacred work. To speak truth, one must not only perceive rightly, but stand rightly. The shape of the body conditions the force of the voice. In rites of invocation, offering, or judgment, posture is not performance. It is declaration. It declares who you are, where you stand, and what you are prepared to do. This triad teaches that embodiment is the first proof of sincerity, and that truth, to be spoken with power, must be grounded in a body that confirms it. May your soul not be repelled from your body in the divine realm. At this stage in the spell, the subject has been granted a voice, restored to perception, and composed into ritual form. But these alone do not make a being whole. For the construction of agency to hold, there must be unity, not just between faculties, but between the core elements of personhood. This triad confronts that final interior threshold, the alignment of soul and body under the gaze of divine law. The soul, in Egyptian thought, is not an abstraction. It is the Ba, the mobile, conscious essence that carries identity across thresholds. It is capable of flight, of encounter, of dialogue with the divine. The body, by contrast, is the sacred vessel that anchors that identity, gives it place, shape, and ritual visibility. Without the body, the soul is diffuse. Without the soul, the body is inert. Each needs the other to be intelligible. And yet, the spell does not affirm their union outright. It casts it in the form of a negation. May your soul not be repelled from your body. This phrase names a danger, the disintegration of the self at the moment it seeks divine recognition. Repulsion here is not merely rejection, it is the unraveling of coherence. It implies that in the divine realm, the measure of worth is not power or purity alone, but integration. The gods do not receive fragments, they recognize only that which holds together. The logic of this triad is bottlenecked. All prior restorations, speech, sight, stance, depend on this union. If the soul is repelled, nothing else holds. The voice cannot be justified. The posture cannot be read. The perception cannot stabilize. This is the spell's moment of existential risk. The system either coheres or it collapses. What is at stake is not just divine approval, but ontological survival. For the practitioner, this triad functions as a guardrail against disunity. It reminds us that ritual action without internal coherence is void, that to be seen and heard in sacred space, one must not only be animated but integrated. In meditative or transformative work, this is the moment of reckoning, where intent and form must match, where no part of the self can contradict the whole. To enter divine presence, one must arrive as one being, not a collection of restored parts, but a self held together in truth. This triad teaches that coherence is the final criterion of recognition. Without it, all utterance becomes noise, all movement meaningless. But when the soul rests within the body, and the body holds the soul with integrity, the subject becomes not merely revived, but received. In that reception lies the passage from constructed presence to recognized being, from existence to significance within the order of the gods, so that it may be with the gods and be invoked at the invocation offerings of Osiris. With voice restored, perception aligned, posture formed, and selfhood unified, the final movement of the spell brings the constructed being into relationship, not just with the divine as witness, but with the divine as ritual community. This triad completes the subject's emergence by placing them within a reciprocal system of offering, invocation, and remembrance. It is no longer a matter of what the speaker can say or do, but whether that voice now resounds within a divine economy that hears, responds, and sustains. The first term, the gods, refers not only to divine plurality, but to the celestial order in which justified beings have a place. To be with the gods is not poetic, it is juridical. It marks inclusion within the divine court, especially the Ennead of Heliopolis, whose judgment confers the authority of eternal truth. The second term, invocation offerings, signifies the ritual acts, both material and spoken, by which the living honor the dead and the dead maintain presence among the gods. These offerings are not gifts, they are contracts. They are the mechanism through which presence is made durable and voice is made continuous. And then there is Osiris, not just another god, but the axis upon which this system turns. Osiris is the one who has passed through dismemberment and silence, and returned not merely to life, but to ritual legitimacy. He is the prototype of the justified speaker, the dead who became divine, and thus the guarantor that the deceased, if properly aligned, may follow the same path. To be invoked at the offerings of Osiris is to be gathered into that mythic cycle, to be remembered as one who speaks truly and is heard eternally. This triad operates not through hierarchy but through ritual reinforcement. Presence among the gods enables invocation. Invocation situates the soul within the cycle of Osirian resurrection. Osiris, in turn, authenticates the subject's belonging among the gods. Each element reinforces the others, binding the speaker into a closed loop of recognition, remembrance, and return. This is not the static endpoint of resurrection, it is the opening of ritual continuity. The speaker becomes part of a living system, one that answers, sustains, and renews. For the practitioner, this triad teaches that the work of becoming does not culminate in self-expression alone. Speech must be heard, presence must be acknowledged. Action must take place within a system that remembers and reciprocates. This is the difference between utterance and invocation, between isolated voice and ritual speech. Apply this triad when the goal is not just transformation but continuation, to ensure that what is spoken remains active, that what is offered remains connected, and that what is lived echoes in the order beyond. To be part of the invocation offerings of Osiris is to know that speech does not end with death. It endures, carried forward through rites, relationships, and the divine ear that still listens. Spell 174 does not culminate in the promise of resurrection as an end in itself, but in the construction of a being capable of intentional speech within a world ordered by truth. What it restores is not life in a biological sense, but the capacity for agency grounded in comprehension. The spell does not seek to undo death, but to rebuild the architecture of meaningful presence, the ability to perceive rightly, to speak justly, and to act in ways attuned to consequence. In this framework, giving a mouth is not the reanimation of an organ, but the initiation of a subject into the capacity for logos. Structured, consequential speech that resonates with cosmic order. This reconstruction unfolds through a layered system of triadic relations, each one restoring a different dimension of sentient function. First, the instruments of speech are returned, enabling expression. Then perception is reactivated through sight and hearing aligned to divine presence. The body is repositioned into ritual posture, signaling readiness and moral intent. The soul is joined to the body, preserving existential coherence and eligibility for divine recognition. And finally, the subject is embedded within a ritual economy, a field of invocation, offering, and mythic continuity that sustains the utterance beyond the moment, echoing it within the presence of gods. What the spell ultimately produces is not revival, but intelligibility, not animation, but awareness. The one who emerges from this process is not simply alive. They are situated, coherent, and capable of participating in the reciprocal structures that define sacred order. They are no longer a passive recipient of rites, but a recognized speaker within the ongoing discourse of divine truth. In this light, resurrection is not the telos of the spell, but the process of understanding it itself. So, congratulations. The reality is awakening, not the return of breath, but the generation of a voice that can speak, be heard, and matter within a cosmos of law, memory, and meaning. What will you say?